these fixed index annuities were created about 20 years ago for insurance companies to compete head-to-head with banks. Because just like banks, insurance companies need to raise money to stay in business. And to compete with CDs, at the time interest rates were higher, banks were paying high rates on CDs, so insurance companies weren't bringing in as much money. So they created these fixed index annuities as a way to compete with that. And with these, there generally is no fee, which is a good thing, but what you're giving up is you're giving up that upside potential.
Are you ready for a successful retirement? We're addressing the topics facing today's retirees. Welcome to Retire with Ryan. Now here's your host, Ryan Morrissey.
Welcome back. This week we're tackling another listener question. And this listener writes in that they have an investment portfolio of about 80% stocks, 20% bonds. Over the last 5 years, they've averaged over a 12% return per year. And they're now being pitched to invest some of their money into a fixed indexed annuity. And they want to know whether this is a good idea or not. So in this episode, I'm going to address fixed indexed annuities and how they work so that you can understand whether this type of investment may or may not be appropriate for you. And there's really 4 things that I think you should know anytime you're considering investing in a fixed indexed annuity. And those 4 things are: how do you make money? How does the insurance company make money? How do you then access your money once you invest in one of these? And how does your financial advisor make money? So I'm going to go through those 4 things. First is, how do you make money? And maybe you've heard that you can make equity-like returns without any of the risk. Wouldn't that be great, right? If we could be like this listener and be able to make 10 to 12% a year, every year, like clockwork, without any of the risks, we'd all sign up for that. And unfortunately, there is no investment that's going to give you that, right? The last investor that claimed to offer that to his clients was Bernie Madoff, and we all know that was fake and he was making up returns. So you need to understand that with the fixed index annuity, you have different investment options when you purchase it, and they're tied to different indexes. And it could be tied to the S&P 500, the Russell 2000, the EFA, and each one of these indexed annuity issuers, they're issued by insurance companies, choose to offer these options. They also could offer you a fixed account where maybe you earned 2% or 1.5% interest. And then each year, depending on the type of contract that you buy, because they're made to sound very simple, but they can get confusing, you then have the ability to make a certain amount of interest each year based off the index that you choose. And you can choose multiple indexes. So for simplicity's sake, let's just say that you chose the S&P 500 index. That's what your indexed annuity is going to track for the next year. And you chose what's known as the point-to-point, which is the simplest one to understand. So let's just say on day 1 today, you're buying this indexed annuity, and you and the insurance company would both look to see what is the S&P 500 valued at today. Well, currently it's worth $4,440. So that's the value. So 365 days later, they're going to look to see what is the S&P 500 worth 365 days later. And if it's gone up in value over that initial value, then you earn interest equal to what that difference is. So let's just say that it went up 2%. Well, that's how much interest you'll earn over the next year. But I mentioned before, they all have a cap, and that cap is decided each year. And let's just say that cap was actually 5%. So over the next year, you can earn up to 5%. But if the S&P 500 had made, let's say it makes 15% over the next year, you unfortunately don't receive 15% interest, you receive 5% interest. So that's one of the major drawbacks what people fail to understand is that you're not receiving 100% of the upside of the S&P. You're capped out. So it depends, how well the S&P does from year to year, depending on how much you could be missing out in performance. But that's what you're giving up. What you're gaining is with these indexed annuities, there usually is no downside, meaning that if the S&P 500 lost 20% for the next 12 months, then you actually don't earn anything. So your return for the year would be 0. So that is appealing to some people. And then there's a lot of other ways how these interest credits work. There could be one, and that point to point is the easiest to understand. And if people are using these, it's usually what I recommend. There also could be a monthly average. They could then take the average of the S&P every month and then average that over the next 12 months. They could use a participation rate where you received like 50% of the S&P's upside capped out as well. There could be a spread option where if it earns more than a certain amount each year, let's just say it earns more than 4% and that's what you earn. So you can see it starts to get really confusing. So that's where these things can be complicated. And if you're going to use one, I would say probably the simplest would be the point-to-point, annual point-to-point to understand and be able to track how it works. Some of these companies too have created their own indexes, which are things that you can't even track. So that's the other confusing thing. So you'd probably want to stick with one of the more common ones. Usually there's only 4 or 5 choices within these anyway. And some of these companies too will offer a bonus where they'll give you like a 10% bonus. So if you put in $100,000, they'll give you a 10% bonus. But usually if they're offering you a bonus, they're offering you a lower cap rate. So if you're going to look at these, you want to try to find whatever company is going to give you the highest cap rate potential. But unfortunately, each year after the first year, the cap rate is reevaluated based on interest rates. And you might get a good cap rate initially, but if rates stay low, the cap rate might go lower, which means that your potential future return might go down. So that brings me to point number 2 is how does the insurance company make money? It's not extremely important because you're really concerned with how you make money, but while we're on the topic, we might as well explain how they make money. So these fixed index annuities were created about 20 years ago for insurance companies to compete head-to-head with banks. Because just like banks, insurance companies need to raise money to stay in business. And to compete with CDs, at the time interest rates were higher, banks were paying high rates on CDs, so insurance companies weren't bringing in as much money. So they created these fixed index annuities as a way to compete with that. And with these, there generally is no fee, which is a good thing, but what you're giving up is you're giving up that upside potential. There's no way over time that if the S&P 500, if we're using that as our benchmark, has average returns of 6 to 8%, that if you're invested in one of these index annuities, you will have the same return. It just won't work out that way. So you're giving up a tremendous amount of upside. And because these were created to compete head-to-head with CDs, their performance is very similar to buying a CD. And these current low interest rate environments that we have, I looked up just earlier to recording this, what could you earn on a 1-year CD? And I'm seeing rates below 1%. So for your CD money, these fixed index annuities might be a better alternative for you with a few trade-offs that I'll get to in a minute, but they're probably not a better alternative for you than taking your money out of an S&P 500 index fund or a mutual fund or stocks, because those over time are definitely going to give you more potential to make money than one of these fixed index annuities. But the insurance company, getting back to how they make money, they take the money that you give them and they buy options on the index that you're buying. So you could do this on your own. You go out, you buy a 1-year option on the S&P 500. It costs you a certain amount of money to buy that. And the remainder that's left over, so let's just say it costs them 2% of the money you're investing to buy that index. So then 98% of your money is invested in the insurance company's, what they call their fixed account, which is the money that they have invested. It's invested in long-term bonds. Maybe they're earning 2 to 3% on it. And that's how the insurance company's making money. They're making money on your money, just like a bank. So next is, how do you access your money? Well, almost all of these fixed index annuities have some type of a commitment period or what's known as a surrender schedule. And that is the period of time that the insurance company requires you to keep your money invested with them before you can get it back without a penalty. And that ranges. That could be as short as 5 years and as long as, I've seen some out there that are 14 years. So what that means for whatever schedule you sign up with, let's just say you choose a 5-year one. So for the first 5 years, for you to get your money out, you're going to have to pay a penalty in those first 5 years. And that could be, it depends on the company, maybe 6-7%. It declines from there. So within those first 5 years, you have to pay a penalty. So that's one of the trade-offs with investing your money in one of these. Some of these companies will offer you what's known as a 10% free withdrawal. And with that, you're able to take out 10% a year of what you've invested with them. So let's just say you put in $100,000. You could take out 10% in the first 5 years without a penalty. If the company offered that, anything more than 10%, there'd be a penalty. But with all of these annuities, they function similar to retirement accounts, that once you put money into them, you now are subject to age 59 and a half requirement. And what that means is that if you try to take money out of these before age 59 and a half, in addition to the penalties the insurance company might charge you, you also are now going to be subject to taxes and a 10% penalty for any profits that you take out. So that's the other thing to be aware of, is that if you're in your early 50s and you're investing in any type of annuity, but especially this one, you're now putting your money into something where you're subject to 10% penalty and taxes on gains, not on your principal. But if you leave your money in one of these for a while, then you go to take it out at age 58, you're now going to have to pay taxes and a 10% penalty, both federal and state tax, and a 10% penalty by taking them out. No matter when you take the money out, if this is money that's non-retirement money, you're always going to be subject to paying tax on your gains. So that's another negative trade-off, is that when you compare this to investing in a stock or a mutual fund or an indexed fund, with those funds, most likely over time, because of the way our taxes are structured, taxes are lower on dividends and long-term capital gains. You'll probably pay less tax on those than you would investing in an annuity, just because of the way they're structured. So also for that reason, they're not a great investment as far as taxes go. And it is possible with these that if you take them out early, you might also have to pay something called a market value adjustment. So what does that mean? Well, what that means is that, very simply, if you invest in one of these fixed index annuities, and when you go to take the money out, interest rates have gone up as compared to where you invested the money, the insurance company charges you an additional penalty, because now they're losing money by selling long-term bonds that they bought that have gone down in value. Because as you remember, with bonds, if interest rates go up, bond prices go down. So the insurance company has to charge you back that penalty they're paying. So most likely, given where we are right now, we're at an extremely low point for interest rates. Interest rates will be going up in the future. So for that reason, if you're going to be investing in one of these, you definitely don't want to be taking it out prior to the scheduled commitment period that you've signed up for, that 5 years or 7 years, because you're going to have to pay an additional penalty on top of the taxes and other penalties. So you can start to see why these have a lot of negatives in them. And the last thing to cover, which I think is probably really one of the most important ones, which is probably why this listener was writing into me, is how is your financial advisor making money from this transaction? And you might even not be able to use the term financial advisor. So going back to another earlier episode that I recorded, which was how not to get ripped off by your financial advisor, it's important to understand the type of advisor that you have. And a financial advisor used to be defined as somebody who's actually working for you as a fiduciary, which means that as a fiduciary, they're either a fee-only financial planner or a certified financial planner, and preferably both, that they have to put your interest in front of their own at all times. And the other type of advisor is really not an advisor. They're either a broker or an insurance salesperson. And that type of person has no fiduciary obligation. And that's what I would suspect if we dug into the background of the person recommending to this listener to buy this. They either maybe are just licensed as an insurance agent, which is fine. There's a lot of great people that are working as insurance agents, but they're not working as fiduciaries. So their obligation is not to say, hey, Mr. and Mrs. potential client, you've been earning a 12% return. Maybe this investment allocation is the right thing for you. You should just leave your money there. But instead, they're looking at, hey, I can make a really nice commission by selling this fixed index annuity. And if you want to make sure the potential financial advisor you're considering working with, or maybe even the existing financial advisor that you're working with, has your best interest at heart, you can check out my blog post, Top 10 Interview Questions When Hiring a Financial Advisor. And if you go through those questions with this advisor, you'll get to the bottom of whether or not they have your best interest at heart and will be working with you as a fiduciary. So when you're working with someone who's not a fee-only financial planner, not a fiduciary, helping you evaluate these fixed index annuities, they're being paid by commissions. And unfortunately, commissions can kind of muddy the waters. And that's why a lot of professionals like myself have moved to being fee-only financial planners. So you have to really ask yourself, what is the incentive for the person that's recommending this annuity to me? Because there are actually no-load fixed index annuities, and no-load meaning no commission. And if you were looking at one of these, that's where I would go, or at least work with a financial planner who's a fee-only financial planner who you're going to pay either hourly or a flat fee to help you evaluate these so that you could compare it against what you're investing in and really evaluate it as objectively as possible. Because where I've seen these missold many, many times, going back to what I originally said about people being told that, hey, you can get the returns of the S&P 500 or of the stock market without any of the downside. And people buy these and then they find out later on that that's not the case. They find out 5 years later, well, I only made 8% in this or 9%, but if I left my money invested, it would have made 30% for me. And that's where I think people are fooled. I've actually seen a client who was sold one of these by someone posing as a financial advisor. They had them take their money out of something where they were earning about 2.5% interest to buy one of these indexed annuities. And surprise, their cap rate over the next year was 1.5%. So meaning their upside that they could earn over the next year was 1.5%. So they actually lost 1% by buying this indexed annuity. It really is absolutely criminal, the advice that this person gave to this client. Luckily, they were within what's known as the free look period. All of these annuities have what's known as a free look period, depending on the state that you live in. It's anywhere from 10 days to 30 days, where during that time, if you change your mind about buying one of these, you can actually take your money out and you can get all your money back without any penalties or fees. And that's what I was able to do for this client. Luckily, they notified me. They had realized that they probably done something wrong, and they reached out to me and we were able to reverse this. So bottom line, fixed index annuities could have a place for you. They could be a good alternative to the money that you have in CDs or cash, but it really needs to be money that you're not going to need probably for the time frame of the annuity commitment period. And I would say that's usually 5 to 7 years. But if you're willing to leave it in there, leave it invested, it can possibly do better for you. But I wouldn't look at this as an alternative to investing in the stock market, because I don't think, or I know that these returns will not be better than the stock market. They're just not mathematically possible. So I hope you really enjoyed this episode. I appreciate these listener questions. If you have a listener question yourself, please go to Retire with Ryan. And then from there, you can find the contact form that I have on my website, and you can put your information in there as well as your question, and I'll do my best to address your question on a future episode. And if you also haven't left me a review on Apple Podcasts, I greatly appreciate that. I've received a number of awesome reviews, so I thank the listeners that have done that. But if you haven't, then I would appreciate, pull out your iPhone, search Retire with Ryan. If you scroll down to the bottom, you can then leave a review and a comment as well. So have a great week, and I look forward to talking to you next Wednesday. Take care.
You should consult a financial advisor familiar with your specific circumstances before you make any financial decisions. Nothing in this broadcast constitutes a solicitation for the sale or purchase of any securities. Any mention of rates of return are historical or hypothetical in nature and are not a guarantee of future returns. Ryan Morrissey, CFP, is an investment advisor representative of Morrissey Wealth Management, LLC, a registered investment advisor.